Hey everybody, welcome. We're so glad you're here, and I'm here with Jonathan Cain from Journey, and I'm really excited that you gave us a chance to get on the tour bus with you. You're in the middle of the Final Frontiers tour. I am the director of a new show that we're developing and in production on called The Gospel of Rock and Roll, and it's been about a little over 4 years now that we've been working together on this, and so we're really trying to ramp things up, get this thing finished this year. And so we wanted to speak directly to people that we want to kind of give a chance to educate about the show and also inspire you to hopefully get involved. So one thing I want to say to our audience about Jonathan is how this all happened. If you remember back in 2018, I did an interview with you for your book, Don't Stop Believing. A couple of years later, I brought you a film I'd worked on. I was like, hey, what do you think about this film? Remember we talked about that? And then a couple of years later, I had this idea for this show. And if you remember, part of it for me was, who could we, interview? And you were one of the people that made perfect sense to interview. But I needed a host. And I started looking at all the boxes that you checked, coming out of the church, going and becoming a very famous musician, returning to your faith after kind of having a dry spell of hiatus from your faith. And then the two things that you have done that are very unique, and I've not found anybody else yet that has checked these two boxes at the same time, is you're still touring in the general market, but you're also writing worship music and actively involved in your church back home.
Yes.
So if somebody in the comment section wants to tell me of someone I've missed, I don't know if anybody else checks all those boxes. But tell me, whenever I first reached out to you, I do remember that you responded very quickly and said, this is an interesting idea. I like this idea. Why did that intrigue you so quickly? Because I was kind of surprised.
Well, I totally believe that, music is heavenly inspired, and that God has everything to do with it, and so that, as a classical student of music, I went to Conservatory of Chicago and studied. A lot of the great composers were sons of pastors, and many of the great pieces of music were inspired to be played in church. So we have to go back that far to the 1800s, 1700s, where like even Mozart was asked to write a mass, and that's the foundation of all music. Johann Sebastian Bach, the same thing, very, very spiritual, rooted in the church. So you can say there isn't any popular song that doesn't have Johann Sebastian Bach's rules and regulations for music. The harmonies all come from the church. So much of the spiritual music from the South inspired blues and R&B, and so it's such a broad fabric that you have to say God had a hand in all things musical, and that's what inspired me, because I know without Negro spirituals there's no blues and rock and roll. It's just not, and so it all comes from the church, and people probably take it for granted, especially the young people today. They don't understand, and the church, we find, is a place where you can develop yourself as a singer and artist. And we've seen people like Whitney Houston come out of church, Aretha Franklin, Mahalia Jackson. They found the excellence in their craft, up there on stage, right behind the pulpit, or singing, And I, as a little kid, my first gig as an 8-year-old was singing Latin music, Gregorian chants, back to the answering the priest in Catholic Church, So it was very a spiritual experience, and I remember that the whole congregation answering us and us singing, and then the answer, and singing and the answer. And that is basically my first, look at music and celebrating and participating to a big audience, So sure, it makes total sense that we kind of expose this, and like a lawyer, we'll prove our case. We'll prove our case over and over and over again. And so my journey, talking to some of these people, have been just so inspiring and eye-opening and humbling. We have this this great musical, guy, Kenny Wayne Shepherd, who's so humble, and yet he plays so fiercely, and his heart's so connected to the Lord, you would never know it, But there it is. Dean Castronova, who's a beast on the drum set, is just tender heart for the Lord, and all music comes from heaven. So, and we ask the same question: where does music come from? What's the purpose of music? And it's to inspire, and and so that certainly is the story we're telling.
So there's four primary elements that, as I see it, we do historical context. We bring in the musical element. You have some performances that were, the ones we have so far are incredible. I'm excited to have more added. There's also the inspirational stories from the features and the conversations, but also your personal. What's been really fun is trying to find angles from your personal story with those boxes that you check, where we are able to give you relatable moments with these artists, whether it's Larry Gatlin or Ricky Skaggs on the country side,
Sure.
or a Kid Rock and a Kenny Wayne Shepherd on the rock blues side. So has that been some of the highlights for you, is being able to meet some of these people for the first time, maybe some people you're reconnecting with, and realizing no matter what the genre is, how connected you are because of the nature of music and where it comes from?
We're a brotherhood, musicians are a brotherhood, and I think the idea of being dedicated and being disciplined and being obedient is such a Christian thing. We need our faith to love the Lord, and we need our faith to have confidence to play an instrument, to perform. We have to count on God to give us that fuel, to give us that spark. Without the Lord, you heard our drummer Dean just talking about how, he every night he gives it, he asks God to make him the best he can be. So they go hand in hand, and I don't know how many times, I felt I couldn't do something, or I was like, I should give up. My dad was the one that said to me, "John, don't stop believing." I'm like, "Yeah, Dad, that's right. I won't. Look where you came from." And so yeah, it's really great to connect to that brotherhood and tap into the reality of faith being such a part of performance, and such a part of creation. God, give me the lyrics to say this right. God, give me the melody to connect, to people. And that all comes from God.
Yeah. Why do you think it's important that we're doing this? Telling the story of the history, connecting it ultimately back to the great creator, God, right? And through the church, but also sharing these inspirational stories of guys like Lee Brice. People kind of maybe know about their faith. But
Zach Williams.
Zach Williams.
We have these artists that all of a sudden get smitten, and they think, I'm not connecting to where I'm supposed to be, and I think for me, I had a second look at, wait a minute, I need to line up, and what's God saying about me, but the other thing is, we take it for granted that music just happens, and inspiration and songs just happen. They don't. There's stories behind them, there's struggles behind them, and what we're showing, I think, is that the faith is the ultimate creator. God is of this thing we call music, and we just take it for granted that it just grows on trees, and it doesn't. It has to have a source. It has to have a flow, a spark, an inspiration, and God is the great inspirer. The great, like, what's the spark about this? I'm going to do this today. Well, God is driving that thing, and that's why He is so responsible for the great music that's been left, and hopefully there's more to come.
Why is now the right time? We're living in a pretty interesting time in this world's history.
Yeah.
Why is right now the time to talk about music and where it comes from and what it's for?
With all of this, we have decline. I mean, let's face it, church is on a decline right now. We have to lift up. The church needs to awaken, and it needs to have a revival. And I think that it celebrates what has gone on before. We cannot forget, you know, our past, and so we're looking back in the past in a lens saying, look how important this was. We can't, you know, in a digital age, it's easy to erase stuff, you know, and forget it. And I think for us, it's showing with that lens back to creation, and where that all comes from, and inspiration, and just the style of what came out of the church, and what is, you know, like hip hop and rap and all this stuff. I mean, we found out that there was actually, you know, rap artists that way back in the 50s that were, you know, using kind of worship things, and you know, so yeah, it's important to not just sort of gloss over. And again, we can erase a lot of things, and we'll get lost in the mix if we don't shine a light on them and say, wait a minute, how about this? You know, wow. Because there's so many other distractions. You know, we have all of this stuff, the games everybody's playing. We don't really, you know, it's easy to get lost in it. And this is great because it puts the focus back on the source of all creation, musically, you know, what happens. You know, you think about what it takes to make a hit song happen, and it's relationships, right? Where do relationships come from? The church. The relationships come from the church, and Jesus came for relationships, and it takes an army to make a hit song, you know. So there's a belief. I believe this song's going to be a big song. You know, when they first heard Elvis, they weren't sure, you know. Well, we're not sure, you know. And then it was undeniable Elvis was the guy, right? So those relationships are also important in the music business, and they, I think, start in the church, you know. Yeah. It's that yin and yang. You have to have those relationships, and where you can have a great song and it can go nowhere, or it can go straight to the top, depending on your relationships, depending on, you know, your journey, your path, where you're headed, and, you know, and where's the heart behind it, you know, and that's God's going to give you that. Yeah.
Well, I'm thankful for our relationship. I'm thankful
Yes,
that you actually gave me the interview back in 2018, and that we stayed in touch. And because I really do believe that our partnership and the crew we have, the other producers involved, have something special here. I really do. And if you're really intrigued by what you've been hearing, go to thegospelofrockandroll.com, and you can see a longer video that kind of shows some elements of the show, kind of shows some of the interviews and things that we're doing, and also previews other people that we've already interviewed. So it's a great place to go, find out how you can invest, become a collaborator with us, because like a lot of other great shows that have been out in the last few years, it's taken an army of believers and people who believe in the series or the concept or movie, whatever it might be, to make it happen. So we can't do this without you, our supporters, and we're really excited though to see what God's doing with the show. And thanks for your time, and Jonathan, have a great rest of your tour.
Thank you, will do.
We're looking forward to get back into production soon.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, guys.